Hello everybody, it's Brian and we're back for another Fusion 360 tutorial. I hope everyone is doing well. You're probably looking at this and saying, Fusion 360, but Brian, that's an Uno deck. Well, it's actually not an Uno deck. I'm here sequestered with my kids during the coronavirus crisis, making these videos, and well, we're doing a lot of family games, and well, when you play family games, sometimes things get broken. Like this Uno box. So the project I'm going to show you really revolves around bringing in a reference file that you can sketch on top of. And so I'm going to ask you all to do this for one of your next assignments, but your next assignment is essentially to find a box, deconstruct the box, and then draw the box in Fusion in 2D so that it could then be used as a template either by printing a PDF or by sending it, if you had a laser cutter, to the laser cutter. Sadly, I'm at home here where I'm not at Lehigh, where I don't have access to the laser cutter, but when I do get back to Lehigh, I can absolutely recut a new Uno box to replace this one that clearly is torn and broken in the back. So I finished very carefully sort of deconstructing this box. You can see where it was glued, the edges were glued. I've taped it down to a nice dark background. This is just my coffee table. I taped it down so that as I take a photo, I don't get distortion in the lines not being parallel because it's like lifted off the surface of the table. So that's a pro tip, if you will. If you're taking photographs of things, you have to make sure your lines are flat. So here's the image I just took with my cell phone, and I have it here on my computer, and we're going to use this as a reference to draw on in Fusion. So looking ahead to the future, I'm going to ask you to do this as one of your next assignments, to go through the process to draw a box. It doesn't have to be an Uno box, it could be a cereal box or an Amazon.com box, as that's probably one of the few things that you can actually get right now, or another box that you just have laying around. So deconstruct it, lay it flat, and photograph it so that you can draw it. But in the future, this is really practical if you have a sketch in your sketchbook and you want to take that sketch, bring it into a CAD environment, and draw it in the CAD environment without sort of building it from scratch. If you have something that's like perfectly proportioned or some beautiful curves that you want to try to match, you can do that with a sketch. It's also a great way of trying to get profiles off of products that already exist. So you can take a photo of a product, again, try to be straight and head on with that photo. Remember, you get parallax from the lens, so it starts to distort lines if you're not like directly in front of it. So, you know, I was standing on a chair above my coffee table to make sure I tried to get this as straight as possible. But you can bring that photo of that product into Fusion. Okay, so step one, get the image, that's what we have here, and then step two, we're going to go into Fusion and use this image as a reference file. Okay, so in Fusion, we're going to start just on a blank file. So I have a new tab open here, nothing on my screen, and I'm going to start by inserting that image so I can work on top of it. So the insert menu is here. The default icon above the insert is this insert canvas, which is actually what we're going to do. But if you click insert, you see there's a couple options here. There's decal, which is if you wanted to like put a sticker on something after you've drawn it that was an image, you can do that. But in this case, we're going to insert this canvas. So I choose canvas. It's going to ask me where it is. It's not in the Fusion Cloud, so I'm going to have to navigate from my computer. I'm going to choose it here from my Google Drive. And now it's asking me where I would like to insert it. So I've identified the name of the file. In this case, it's a JPEG. It could be a PNG or a PDF. On face, it says face because if you have an existing geometry and you want to insert a reference on top of a face of an existing geometry, you can do that. In this case, I'm starting from scratch, so my face happens to be a plane. And in this particular case, it doesn't really matter what plane I want to draw on. I'm thinking more a top view, so I'm going to choose the top plane. When I do that, it's showing me my image here in this red bounding box. You could absolutely leave it at the origin point. There's really no reason to move it. I don't like drawing on top of the origin because it's kind of annoying visually. So I'm just going to move my canvas with the little arrows kind of up and over away from the origin point. Over here on the menu, most of these things you can go back and modify after the fact. The one thing that you have to do so that you can do that is where it says selectable, you want to make sure that that box is checked. So I think by default it's not checked. I do this often, so my default is now selected to on, but make sure that that is checked before you do anything else. Canvas opacity, that's like how bright the canvas is. You can turn it up or down. 50% seems to be a good value. You can make it maybe a little bit lower than that. If it's too much lower than that, it's going to be hard to see. So I'm going to leave it right around 50 there. Again, you don't have to worry too much about this stuff. We can manipulate that after the fact. So key here, make sure selectable is on. All right, so I do that. If I zoom in, you can see there's my image of my Uno box. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new sketch on this same plane. So I'm going to invoke the Create Sketch menu, choose the same plane so that these guys exist in the same place. I'm going to zoom in, and the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line in the sketch. And that line I don't want to be attached to, this is kind of a deviation, right? Because up until this point, every sketch we've done, we've wanted it to be fully constrained. It has to have some relationship to the origin point. In this case, I don't necessarily concern myself with constraining these. It's really a sketch. What I choose to do with the geometry after that, maybe I can add some dimensions to it, but I'm not going to worry about constraining it. So this first line I'm going to do, I'm going to invoke the line command. I literally want a line that is a horizontal line across my drawing, but not tied to the origin point in any way. Once I have that, I can either hit the green check or hit escape to get a line command. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this line. I'm going to hit escape to get a line command. I'm going to position this line so that as I rotate the canvas behind, I can kind of visually line up a straight line in my image with the straight line I've drawn here as a reference point. And the reason I want to do that is when I start to draw my object, I want to make sure that lines start to intersect at 90-degree angles, and if I start to draw them crooked like this, it's going to be really hard to define that perpendicular, horizontal, vertical sort of relationship to one another. So I want to start with this sketch existing at least close to that horizontal vertical mark. And you know, I clearly did this on purpose. My image is already skewed out of that line so that I can show you how to manipulate that. So first thing I do is draw that line. I'm going to hit escape to deselect it just so it's not quite so thick. And then I'm going to come over, hover over my canvas here, select my canvas, right click, and I'm going to say edit canvas. And when I do that, you will see that this little icon sort of appears on top. This allows you to position your canvas up or down, right? But one of the things it allows you to do is if you click on this little circle, it allows you to kind of rotate your canvas. And as you start to rotate, you'll see that Fusion kind of defaults to these like 5-degree increments, so 0, 5 degrees. Which actually 5 isn't too horrible. I'm going to zoom in here so I can see what's going on. I'm going to maybe grab this line. Oh, I can't do it because I'm in the middle of this. So I'm going to hit enter to accept that 5 degrees. I'm going to move this line up here so that it's closer to a horizontal line. Hit escape again to deselect that line. Edit canvas again. And now I'm going to continue to rotate that canvas. And this time, I might have to go in here, select this number, and I'm going to say, like, what happens if I rotate it another 2 degrees? Oh, too much. So I'm going to go 1 degree. Oh, that looks pretty good. So what I'm looking at here is this line, my blue line, in relationship to that top edge of the Uno box, so that as I start to draw this, I can draw right on top. So that looks pretty good. I can click OK here. I can move this line again, maybe down on top of another seam that kind of goes across the box. Hit escape. And you can see like this seam, there's a little bit of space here. it's kind of a little bit there. So I might actually go back in and rotate my canvas. I'm going to edit the canvas. So that's a right click again. Kind of went up, that's too far. So let's maybe rotate this -1. It's too far, -0.8. Yes, that looks pretty good to me. So we'll do okay. Again, the goal here is it does not have to be perfect. The goal here is to get it close so that you can feel confident when you start to deviate from your underlying drawing that you know things are still pretty close to where they need to be. So hopefully that alignment thing makes sense. All right, the next thing we need to do, and this is kind of critical at this stage, is I want to give my drawing some scale. Now we can go in and hone that scale, but if you draw things too small or too large and then you try to scale the whole thing, you're gonna have some real issues. So what I want to do is I want to try to get a relatively close scale to do that. So what you need to do is, you can kind of do it anytime. For me, I had to do it before I started the video. You want to measure in the real world kind of like a distance that you can reference in here. So in my case, I measured the full width of the box. Try not to measure like the length of this little thing, because if you're off by a tiny little bit, it's going to throw off the relative scale of the whole object. Try to use kind of the outside dimensions, either along height here or along width here. So in my case, I measured from this edge to get a number that I can use now to scale my image to an appropriate scale within Fusion. So the measurement that I got when I measure this is 235 millimeters from this edge to this edge. And this right now doesn't have any scale. So again, I'm going to right click on my canvas, and this time I'm going to choose Calibrate, which is the next one down. It sort of defaults you back to this home view. I'm going to click my top view just so I'm back in there. And I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to click a point here. And I'm going to click a point pretty much straight across to here. And I'm going to say I want that to be 235 millimeters. And so you saw it was saying that that's like 11 millimeters. I clearly want it much larger than that, otherwise I'll have a very, very small Uno deck. So 235 millimeters, I hit enter. Before I forget, I'm going to actually delete this line because this line is going to be very, very small if I don't delete it. So I'm going to delete that line, and then I'm going to zoom back out again so that I can see what you'll see is it doesn't look like anything's changed, but this is now scaled appropriately based on that value. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video there because the next stage is tracing on top of this. And I don't want this one video to be too long, so tune in to the second half where I'll show you how to trace over top of this existing image. All right?